The goal of this video is to convince you that Lost Planet is a lot worse than it looks. And perhaps that doesn't require much convincing at all, but I'm going to detail why that is the case regardless. Nothing about this game matches itself. I once saw a woman wear a black and white plaid shirt under a red, white, and blue plaid shirt. That's what this game is like. The maps are too large and barren for walking on foot to hold your attention, the guns are too boring for how bombastic the fight scenes are, the movement, both on foot and in a VS, is too disjointed for the demands of the level design and how you need to fight, and the enemy design makes sense in gameplay before it makes sense in the context of the lore, making enemies not credible and therefore shearing suspension of disbelief. I'll explicate on that list in order. Running speed is slow and at a fixed rate, which wouldn't be a problem with the exception of the enormous areas that you must cross to proceed. This game would excel with tighter spaces and more carefully presented moments of combat. As it stands now, enemies are simply thrown into an arena and you gotta fight them. On to number 2, this game is clearly trying to be epic as evidenced by the huge, cool-looking mechs and crazy music and bombastic battles. None of this matters when the moment-to-moment combat is rendered dull by the boring guns with boring names used against enemies with boring movesets. More on enemies later. For number 3, nearly all actions in the game have some type of delay, cooldown, or stun such that your movement is constantly interrupted. Listing what you can't do would take longer, so I'll list those. To switch weapons, you must be on the ground and standing still. You can't do anything in the air other than shoot, so no throwing grenades, firing your grapple hook, or 360 no-scopes. And then when you land, you're locked in place for a moment. This makes sense in real life because you'd need that second to break your landing, but this is a game. And when you have to pause when you land, pause when you switch weapons, pause when you pick up weapons, pause when you get into a VS, the game falls into the peril of stop-start flow rather than a continuous flow. Regarding number 4, the orange glowing sacks on the Acrid are stores of concentrated thermal energy. That's cool for gameplay because that means you know what to shoot every time, which is boring in its own right because why in a shooting game would you want the target to be the same on every enemy? But it doesn't match the lore because why would a species that evolved as a process of non-random selection have its most vital organ dangling off the side of its body? You shoot these sensitive sacks and they burst. That would be like carrying your heart in a plastic grocery store bag around your neck. And if it's cold, why would the heat source be the nearest to the coldest possible, as opposed to within the most protective and massive part of the body? Because of the lack of logic of these creatures, fighting them feels that much less believable and by extension, purposeful. As with much of this game, the phrase almost but not quite describes any design decision that you can notice about this game, except that almost is probably giving too much credit. This is the case because Lost Planet prefers to be cool than fun. For example, the grappling hook. The only control you have over its operation is the option to cancel it by pressing the same button after you fired it. It would be engaging to use if it had more than one purpose. Ensuring each element of a game has at least 3 functions is a good place to start. How about 0, attaching to surfaces to zip you to the point of impact, which of course it already does. 1, picking up weapons instead of having to walk all the way over to it. 2, the ability to fire in mid-air in order to string together multiple grapples without landing. And 3, using it to very temporarily stun small Acrid. There are so many more possibilities. It seems like Capcom, the developers, thought to themselves, what does a grapple hook do, as opposed to, what is every way that a grapple hook can interact with this world in a way that would influence gameplay? It's like the team suffered from a severe case of functional fixedness. It's the cognitive bias in which a person can view an object only for its express purpose and nothing else. For example, a t-shirt is only for wearing and not, say, a rag to clean your shoes. Hopping into a VS, unfortunately, does not improve movement feel, and the last battle is the worst example of this. So let's see how bad this gets. Firstly, you get this awesome cutscene of your suit powering up, and if you haven't played the game and you get to this point, I suggest you stop here. This cutscene is to the line, "Luke, I am your father," as the subsequent gameplay is to the character Watto. The button layout and functionality is poor, and the fighting itself is less satisfying than doing community service on your birthday. Despite the laser bullets having an intense automatic lock-on to Eisenberg, they don't actually do any damage to him. They can only destroy these yellow circles and shoot missiles. The melee attack has a period both before and after when you're positionally locked in place, and the heavy melee does marginally more damage with many times the wait period than has the basic attack. In order to counteract the fact that there's too much to say about the poor design of all the enemies, I'll say too little. Attacks are often unintuitively telegraphed or have consequences, like a long stun, that are impossible to anticipate. The source problem of this is largely because moves look too similar. They are all some mostly standard melee attack or projectile that you have to avoid. I use quotes because there are too many occasions where a scene looks dangerous, but isn't. To say that enemies are largely the same throughout the game would be issuing it far too generous of a compliment. New enemies stop appearing very soon, and instead old enemies and bosses are recycled and multiplied to give the illusion of legitimate challenge. I'm tempted to just play a clip and have that demonstrate my opinion, but I know I can't leave it at that. So here's some segments, then I'll outline what's horrible about it. I know I don't have to describe why this is grating. And it's not functional because everything has a sound, a loud sound, and all sounds are simultaneously distinct and plain. So much occurs concurrently that you can't distinguish which actions are being executed by the enemies. It also doesn't help that the sound itself isn't functional. It's difficult to detect the XYZ coordinate of a noise and the enemy that made it, relative to you, because if the enemy is any amount to your left, the sound will play directly into the left channel. So enemies that are meters away already appear as if they're right next to you. What else always seems to be right next to you is smoke. Again, they tried to make this game super epic, and what's the most epic thing ever? Well, explosions, obviously. The explosions in Lost Planet are about 1/10 of the size of the cloud of smoke it produces. Opaque, gray plumes linger on your screen for so long that by the time they subside, another smoke bomb is already about to deliver you some carcinogen air. And they might as well be smoke bombs. The hurt box of the explosion is so small, you can walk through what looks like the remnants of a fireworks store being carpet bombed and barely take any damage. Milk left in direct sunlight for the entire month of July is more internally consistent than this game. This game rendered me so absent-minded that I forgot to let the credits roll because I just wanted to put the game out of my mind. Because I don't have that footage, you're going to have to watch the rest of this video ending on histrionic battle so you can feel the absurdity of what I played. I would also like to add that I'm aware how frustrated this video has sounded, and that's a reflection of my experience of frustration over the course of 2 playthroughs. Many games warrant multiple playthroughs in order to have a robust opinion worth sharing, and I was hoping to mere exposure myself into liking this game more by playing it more, but this had the opposite effect. I noticed more blunders only fueling my distaste for Lost Planet. I sat on the script because I wrote most of it in one sitting, and after reading it, I noticed how salty it seems. After returning to what I wrote though, I still believe everything past Remserpack's thought. I say this because I don't want this to seem like the source of this video was impulse and rage, and if that were the case, I doubt I would have played the game through on 2 difficulties as I have. Even if I don't highlight it in my videos, I usually find the little bit of good in a bad game and the little bit of bad in a good game. But any good in this game that may be worth mentioning is brutally overshadowed by how much bad there is. I don't want to confuse you by hearing me say a few good elements among the bad and thinking that the bargain is worth it. Some people are privy to the shortfalls of this game, but still find the combat and battles worthy of the purchase. Naturally, I can't discount their experiences and what they enjoy, but I wouldn't suggest you play this game even if it were free. Lost Planet violates the most sacred principle of all media: show, don't tell. Not only are there no surprises for the player to discover incidentally, by extension, all the potentially cool moments seem cool only on screen and not in your hand. Moments are cool to see, not cool to do. In a medium in which doing is the primary purpose, this is not permissive of a sustainably engaging experience. Games are a new medium and we're still struggling with how to make them unique from all other media. A good game is bottom up, where visuals are created to match the gameplay intent, whereas a bad game begins with a setting and then explores how gameplay can be interesting. Lost Planet acts as a great case study for how not to construct a game, and I've made this video short as to not waste your time on a waste of time. But if you feel compelled to experience what a game should not play like because you want to appreciate the polish of the games that you do like, then I urge you to do so.